everyone. Yes, this is Siembra. My name is Yazmin Ford, host of Siembra here in Tacoma Radio Universal. And I've been out for a while, so you guys forgive me. I'm a little not too sharp with it is pretty funny that if you don't practice or do something, mm-hmm. you can lose it, right?
Yes.
The more practice you do, you can lose it. So yes, and we have our guests. I have my co-host with me. Thank you, Chris, for making this happen. Today is May 19. I don't want to get the days wrong too. May 19, and we the year has been going so fast. I don't know. It's like a blink. We was in January, and now we're in May. Washington State, beautiful, beautiful Washington State. I love this state. I would not change it for nothing, not to live in this state. We here in Tacoma, Washington, for the people that when they hear Washington, they think Washington, D.C., you know. But we here in the Pacific Northwest, beautiful morning with lots of rain, and I love that. And well, we're going to start the show a little late. Sorry for everyone that was waiting. We're starting a little late, but we're here. And I wanted to start first saying that we're living in different times. We're definitely living in different times. And there's a lot going on. I don't remember what show I had, and I did a little bit of research. And we have more than 50 countries having elections this year.
Wow.
Yes, right now we have República Dominicana, the RD. Also, I think we have England that having elections in May, and then next month Mexico that might have the first human president. She might win. She's favorite. Then we also
the first female president.
Yes,
okay.
Mexico.
Mexico hasn't had a female president?
No. Not
She's
yet.
running.
She's running. Not yet.
Wow.
Not yet.
I thought at first you said first human president. I was wondering.
No. And then I think in June we're gonna have India. India's gonna have an election. So when I think of that, Panama just had an election in May 5th. I feel that might be a shift around the world because of these elections too. You know, so I was thinking we're gonna have these elections. Also, we're looking at the environment in Houston, Texas, what happened, you know, in Brazil, what happened, you know, and the last thing I'm gonna mention, because I know we're running a little late, is what's going on in the Middle East. We want to call it a war, but it's not a war. I can. This is a David and Goliath thing, you know, because the Palestinians are fighting with nothing. When we have this other side that has a massive amount of weaponry, right? So how do you call it a war?
Yeah. But this time there's an opportunity of seeing things differently because Biden has threatened to pull funding if the attack continues, and the head of the armed forces has threatened to resign if there is not a plan for post-attack.
We need to have, and I would like you to come one day too. I don't want to put you in this spot because you're running.
Sure.
But Biden is not. Biden is very, very wishy-washy. Biden says something with his mouth, and then he does something else with his actions. And
be clear, we see this very differently.
Different, yes, we do. He already said that he's going to give Israel $1 billion. When he said, by the other side of his mouth, that he's threatened. It's like me telling my son that is 26 years old that that's not gonna work today. Don't do this because I'm gonna punish you. He do it. He look at me and do it, and I said, next time you do it, I'm gonna punish you. And he do it, and I says, you do it again, next time I'm gonna punish you. But I'm not. And now he's laughing. Now he's saying, she's not gonna do nothing. No. And don't play with her. Don't play with her intelligence, Biden. You are, and is disrespectful and condescending to the American people.
Well, it's nice that Biden is willing to stand up to Congress, who allotted that money, and say, I'm going to overstep your authority and withhold it. So,
let's
but
start
we
it.
need to get back to the show here.
Yeah, starting out hard. Yeah.
Yes. So,
Because I read your profile, and you said you grew up in a home where your mom was Republican or your dad,
My mom's a Republican.
and
My
your dad
dad's a
was
Democrat.
So that's how this feet today.
Yeah. It's what I'm used to. It's what I'm used to. Yeah.
That's how that feels today.
let's get him introduced, and then we'll start this
Yes.
conversation here. So, Cameron Severns is a candidate who has achieved what we don't traditionally expect. He went with a write-in vote and made it onto the state general election ballot, and will be featured on the ballot this time. But Severns and his wife Jennifer have made a home in Summit Waller, where they're devoted members of the community. Together, they have built a local business in housing and insurance. He and his wife are both active in their local church, where Severin leads an addiction recovery ministry, teaches Sunday school. He is also a treasurer of the Family Promise of Pierce County, a nonprofit that helps families experiencing homelessness. So that is definitely our heart as
Yes,
well. So
yes.
we love you for that.
Yes.
But getting back to that divided household, your mother being Republican, your father being Democrat, that defies reason to me. Because that's the opposite of the way it usually is.
It is.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much, Dennis and Yazmin, for having me on. Thank you, Chris and Radio Universal. It's my pleasure to be here. My mom is definitely dyed-in-the-wool Republican. My dad is a good old-fashioned Union Democrat, and he's a teacher, so grew up in a Union home. My mom is definitely more on the conservative side. She's an anti-Trump Republican. So she's very much into integrity and fiscal responsibility and those things, the kind of the old school Republican mentality, which I think she feels a little bit.
She's more Democrat now.
I think that it's funny because in 2016, Trump versus Hillary, and then Bernie was involved. She liked Bernie, right? So I think my mom has definitely seen the danger of Donald Trump. But yeah, growing up, our debates at the at the dinner table were very, very interesting.
I bet.
And I grew up, seeing my dad. He was diagnosed with leukemia when I was a senior in high school, and so I started realizing that our medical system was completely broken, and and so then on the side with my mom is a very passionate, very conservative evangelical, right? So she's strongly pro-life, and it has some social conservatism, right? That I don't agree with. But we do agree on a few things, right? We do agree on a few things, and I think most of us can agree on those things, which is, lowering costs for families and, lowering housing costs and wanting to hold government accountable. I think those things are universal. But my mom and dad definitely, if you get them in a room and they're, opposite sides of the topic, and I have 3 siblings. So I have a younger sister and 2 younger brothers. So. Okay. And they're all from, different parts of the political spectrum. Most lean left, but when we're all together, it's like escalating conversations. So but it's definitely formed my perspective. Half of my friends are conservative. I live in a 50-50 district, so it's sort of defined, my perspective as well.
Okay. Well, I kind of consider myself on abortion pre-1972 conservative.
Ah, okay. So you're pro-choice then.
I'm pro-choice. Yes. Yeah. I've definitely. Although I will do everything I can to try to motivate someone to choose,
Of course.
to follow through, there are all kinds of issues that are legitimate for why they wouldn't. So, I've had people in my own family that have had abortions and have regretted it and had all of that stuff going on. But anyway, so that's not what we're here for. But
It's an important topic, right?
anyway,
Yeah.
so tell us, how did you end up choosing to be a write-in candidate?
Yeah, in 2022, my wife and I saw that no one had filed to run against a person who was extreme right. I would call her MAGA to the 10th degree. She's like the Marjorie Taylor Greene of the Washington State House.
Ooh.
Okay.
Ouch.
So I looked at that and I said, well, no one's going to run against this person. And then we started looking at the laws and we started getting in contact with some other friends, and they said, well, there's a 1% rule in the write-in campaign in Washington State. It just changed. If you get 1% of the total votes in the primary, then they'll put your name on the general election ballot. So we started knocking on doors, reaching out to our friends, and did what organizers do, right? We went out and we worked. And we talked to as many people as we could, and we got enough votes to get on that general election ballot. But the reason, one of the main reasons I ran was between the Dobbs decision, how extreme the person who was in the office was, and frankly, what I felt like was a really disorganized Democratic Party. I said, well, someone has to run, right? The people deserve a choice. They deserve to hear a voice that is a younger voice, a more progressive voice, in my opinion, more common sense voice. And so I didn't think that I was the ideal candidate. No one should. I just felt like, hey, I'm willing to do the work. So that's why I chose to run, and now this time around, in a great position to win. So instead of doing a write-in campaign, we're on the ballot, right, as you mentioned. So we'll be on the primary election ballot. That's August 6th, and we have a great chance to win. And we're running in an open seat now. So there's no incumbent. The person who was the elected left, and so they're running for a different office. So I'm running in the open seat now.
Oh, okay. So you're not running against that woman anymore?
No, I'm not. In fact, there's a great candidate. I hope you have her on. Her name is Shelley Willis. She's my running mate, who is running against Cindy Jacobson.
Oh,
is
okay.
the extreme right MAGA person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to push her.
So one of the things that I was
Absolutely.
Yeah.
one of the things that I was thinking. Tell us a little bit about the district.
Yeah.
And the what is the major concerns about the people in that district? District 25, and you running for position 1. And what does that mean? And I was talking to someone. I was telling them a lot of times people don't connect the dots with politics because they don't understand what it is that you're gonna do for them as a legislator. What is your role? So what it is you do, and what does that mean for me if I want to vote for you?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. I think for most people, they're not paying too much attention to local politics. But local politics shapes our everyday lives in a much bigger way.
Yes.
Like everyone's like, oh, presidential election, Biden, Trump. Oh, I'm not that excited, right? But then there's all these down ballot races that will shape our everyday lives, which are really important. But our district is Puyallup, unincorporated Pierce County, the South Hill area, which is north of south of Puyallup. So the South Hill area, and then all the unincorporated areas up to about 176th, if you know where that is. So
Yeah, we live in that area.
you live in that area. That's
Yes,
right. We were just
yes.
talking about that. And so over to Waller Road and Canyon Road. So that's how how the district is shaped. It's a 50-50 district. President Biden won the district in 2020 by about 3 points. Other Democrats won the district in 2020. But our state representatives lost.
Oh.
And so the Democratic candidates lost. They weren't representing the district at the time, but it's 50-50 that way, right? So top of the ticket, folks are voting for Biden. They're voting for change. They're voting for Democrats. Down ballot, locally a little more conservative. And so what I always, what I'm running on and what I'm telling folks is number one thing is lowering costs for families. And what's the number one cost for families right now? It's housing. Our housing costs are exploding. And so without more volume of homes, and I'm talking about middle housing, density, right? Permitting reform, building the type of homes that are affordable. Starter homes, which we used to have, right? You could buy a small home, it was affordable, but we have to lower housing costs. Now for renters, it's really important to get rent stabilization statewide. So in Tacoma, they did rent stabilization for the city, which is great. But it's really important right now that we get rent stabilization statewide. It's really important to me. So lowering costs and then safe communities. We have to be honest right now that our communities are not as safe as they were. Okay, the rest of the country is having their communities get safer while ours are getting less safe. So we need to invest in we need to be smart on crime. We need to invest in areas where they need law enforcement. We need to also take care of the underlying issues that cause crime, right?
Yes.
And as my philosophy will always be, poverty causes crime, right? In impoverished areas, there's going to be more crime. So if we bring prosperity, jobs, housing, good medical benefits, right? Healthcare and wraparound services for mental health, mental health care. All those things will help to alleviate crime. And then the last thing, that I'm running on is those jobs. As a small business owner and a union guy, I'm a strong believer that jobs can change people's lives. So I want to see that next manufacturing center in our district. Good paying union jobs right in our community. And in my opinion, there's nothing better that will change that. And of course, like you mentioned, reproductive freedom. It's a major issue. We've talked to over 2,000, voters right now. Women are talking about it. They're saying, hey, what's your stance on that? And of course, I'm a candidate that believes in reproductive freedom.
So what it is you would tell people about, and one of the things, especially in the Spanish community, that's why I do this show, is, and you said it, politics have everything to do. So when you go out and campaign and talk to people, and they say, well, I don't believe in politics, I don't like it, I don't get involved. What it is you tell people when they tell you that?
Yeah. In fact, I was just talking to a person the other day. We were walking in his neighborhood, and we were actually going to talk to his parents. And so he was a little younger than me, and he was like in his early 30s. And he said, well, I don't usually vote. And I said, well, we're going to see your parents right now, but what issues are important to you? What did he say? Housing. He goes, I have a great full-time job, but I can't afford to even rent, right? And I said, well, have you thought about getting involved and voting and things like that? And he's like, well, no, but after talking to you, I think I probably should. And so I think it's just that conversation. Just talking to, like, hey, this is how the state legislature affects you, right? So the way that we're going to make a difference in the state legislature is, like for my twin niece and nephew, we're going to cap insulin costs like the Democrats did a couple years ago. They both have type 1 diabetes. That's a huge money savings for my brother and my sister-in-law, right? So all those things are going to make a big impact, but you have to tell someone what you're going to do, face to face. So.
And I think probably the hardest thing for a lot of people that say they don't want to vote, they don't want politics, is we tend to think as idealists. It's my way or the highway.
Right.
And although idealism has the value of envisioning people and changing people's hearts, when it comes to final decisions, you have to compromise.
You have to.
And that's what a lot of our youngest generation doesn't get. They're unwilling to compromise.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with having really firm and strong ideals, right? That's really important. One of the things that we have to do, though, is we have to get things done.
Right.
We have to pass bills. We have to protect manufactured homeowners in our community, right? We have to make sure giant warehouses aren't built. We have to make sure an airport isn't built, right? They were going to build a giant airport out in Graham. Did you hear about this?
Oh, yeah.
The community got together and fought it, people from all across ideological lines. But if we don't have those idealists to push us, but then we have the folks, I consider myself more of a pragmatic Democrat, more of a pragmatic Democrat to say, hey, here's where we can work together on this issue, then we're not going to get anything done.
Yeah.
And so the rhetoric, I think one of the things right now with our politics, Trump and Biden and everything, is our rhetoric, right? Everyone's like, oh, well, Trump says this, and I'm a big Trump fan because he does that. Trump didn't get anything done.
No, he didn't.
He got a tax cut done, that's it.
Yeah.
And
But he talked ideals.
He did.
And because he talked ideals, that caught a lot of attention.
well, he is a very good. He's a very good salesperson. He is, And one of the problems that I'm seeing. Last night I went to an event, and Erasmo was there.
Yeah.
And Erasmo had to do the same thing you did. Because I think with the Democrats, for some reason, and I don't know what's going on with the Democrats here in Washington State, that they don't have anybody to contest these positions and these openings that they have for district and stuff. And it's like, and I talk a lot to Pastor Dennis about this, the Republicans, to me, what I like about the Republicans, I didn't think I was going to say, is they always plan ahead. Right now, the Republican Party is planning for 30 years, for 10 years. They put in judges. Yeah. They put in legislation, my tongue, and they're already planning for 20, 30 years. And the Democrats are always, I feel, that are always lacking. They should be doing more scouting. They should be looking and preparing more people. More younger people, and that's my question to you. And before we start the show, I was telling you about change. I was thinking about change, and you in your 30s.
Yeah, 37, yeah.
And Erasmo also. And we have Charlotte Mena.
Yes.
And we have Carolina Mejia. And we have all these young people that are running, people that are diverse, Mexicans. We have... And I'm thinking, we need more people like that. And why is that the Democrats here in Washington State are not, we have things that are not judge positions that when I look at when we voted, we have positions that are not contested. And that is a big problem. How we get into changing, because I was thinking, you are one person. And all these different people that I mentioned are one person. How we start changing and getting people, like you said, with this kid, more engaged and getting that fire into. I have a 26 years old, and Pastor Dennis has his daughter.
30 years old.
30,
yes.
yeah.
How do we get them? Because they are feeling. My son. First time he was going to vote, he even caucused for Bernie Sanders.
Oh, okay.
And 10 hours, I don't know, they were there, I don't know. I said, I'm going home. And I remember after the Democrats put Hillary, because they put her in there.
Correct.
My son said, I'm not going to vote.
Yeah.
And ever since he's like, I kind of vote. He's not. How do we get more younger people, and how is the Democrats needs to change? Because they're living in a bubble.
This is the question that's, I think, vexed every political campaign for the last 20 plus years. How do we get our young people excited about local politics, or even congressional politics and national politics? Number one, I will say this: politicians do not win elections. Organizers win elections. So I'm proud to say that, I come from an organizing background. I believe in bringing people together, working towards a common cause, whether it's fighting for folks in tenant communities and manufactured communities, or working with the homeless, or, however that is. But organizing wins. So I've got 3 really good young organizers who are volunteering with my campaign, and they are the ones who will make the difference. And they're all between 19 and 22, which is crazy. Because at 19, I mean, I was politically, I voted, right? But I didn't,
You was involved. You was in that, yes.
Yes. And so to have their support is huge. and have them excited about my campaign is huge, because guess what? They know how to speak to their generation, right? So those young organizers are so essential, and they don't get enough credit. They don't get enough credit. And I think everyone thinks like, oh, well, like we were talking AOC earlier, like, oh, she excited, young people and everything. She knew how to organize. She had good young organizers that were helping to get out those voters. So in my opinion, investment has to be made, especially with Democrats, in reaching out to those voters one-on-one, not, television ads, things like that, but through other young organizers to have those conversations about why it matters. And frankly, it's okay to hear, and I hear this, well, I'm mad at Democrats right now, right? Things are expensive in Washington State. It's okay to have those conversations and say, here's why things are expensive, and here's why I want to change that. But you're right that there's so many seats that go uncontested. And the Republicans, let's be honest, the Republicans pick and choose who will be the next person elected in those seats. Erasmo, who he's running against, that's someone who has been in that seat for, I think, 12 years. He's done nothing for that community. Right? Absolutely nothing. But because he's got an R next to his name and he was handpicked, that's why he's got that seat. So I think as Democrats, we have to have those conversations with young voters. We have to contest every seat. And we have to get back to organizing, get back to our basics of organizing. Talking to voters in their homes, one-on-one. Hey, this is what matters. This is how we're going to make a difference. Number one thing, as I'll keep saying this, lower housing costs. That is the main concern I'm hearing from every single voter across the board. We have to do that as Democrats. We have to take big steps next session. Otherwise, I think people are going to be out of reach. So, your thoughts?
Well, personally, I've watched as the Republican Party has morphed towards the Democratic Party over years. The Republicans have always been focused 30 years ahead of time they were back during Nixon's era. They were working towards the day when somebody like Trump could be elected. That was their goal.
That was the 70s, right?
That was, a long time ago.
Wow.
And they achieved it. But there were a lot of Republicans that were Lincoln Republicans that weren't part of that. They didn't agree with it. They didn't support it. And so now we have a splintered party. But if you look at politics through the years, what the Democrats have been saying is what the Republicans are starting to buy. They're morphing. They're realizing that the Democrats have been telling us the truth all along. And we tend to forget that. I was leaning more Republican growing up, and it wasn't until I understood that I realized, hey, I'm still an independent. I will always be an independent because I do not believe that any party should dictate my views on anything.
Sure.
I need to be an individual that chooses my positions on my religion and my conscience and all of that type of stuff. So I will never be a party member, okay, because I see that.
Sure.
But nonetheless, the thing that has attracted me to the Democrats is integrity. The Republicans claim to have integrity, but I've never seen integrity for 20 years.
Yeah, at least.
In the Republican Party. And I think slowly people are realizing that their rhetoric doesn't match their reality.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing that has kept Democrats from being sexy, is because integrity is not sexy.
It's not.
The Republicans can say anything they want to get your heart on board with them. But that's not what you're going to get once they're elected.
Right.
And Democrats refuse to be disloyal and to be dishonest. And that makes them unsexy.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
I'm sorry.
thinking the other day. I was thinking. I was watching. What happened with Yazmin Crockett
Crockett. Yeah.
and Green, and I remember Michelle Obama saying, "When they go low, we go high." I said, "No, this is the time to go low." This is the time to go low. And I think one of the biggest problems with the Democrats too is our narrative. There's a lot of things that President President Biden has done, but we don't hear about it.
Yeah.
The Democrats, I'm sorry, they are very good, very bad at narrative, very bad at propaganda. There is things that when President Biden signed for the big bill for building new roads and all these things, that a lot of the Republicans voted against that. Now these things are getting into place to happen, and they are bragging about it, And we don't have no Democrats to stand and said, wait a minute, you didn't vote for this. And that is the problem and when you don't see people fighting for you, is I have my husband that I don't have, or I have my partner that don't fight for me, eventually you get disengaged, you get dissolution, and the Democrats have to start changing this strategy. Now,
So in other words, the Democrats have to insist that they get the attention for what they have been doing.
they don't have to insist. They have to go out there. And one of the things that I noticed about the Democrats and the Republicans is that the Democrats are very bad at telling the truth. And the Republicans are very good at lying. Yes.
That's an interesting way to put that.
Yes, they're
Yeah.
very good at lying.
Yeah.
And why are we not, but I wanted to go back to housing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to housing and food prices because that's the two big things that
Sure.
around the country. And not just around the country, around the world. Because I have my family that live in Panama. And they talk about food. Everything has gone up. Inflation everywhere in the world. And I tell my mom and I tell my brothers that still live in Panama, I said, you know what? If you look at the pandemic and then the wars, that is the consequence of these big events that happen worldwide. I mean, you think food is expensive in Panama. It is expensive in the United States. And clearly we have to talk about that too. Because people pointed to whoever is in charge. It's your fault that I'm paying too much money for things and I pay $100 when I go to Walmart.
Right.
And the president should be out there saying, you know what? These are consequences, and it's not just happening in the United States. It's happening around the world. The discontent. And I don't think we explain that to people. As I tell my mom, I said, things are expensive there than here.
Sure. Yeah.
And we have a pandemic. We had wars. One, not two, because I don't like to call the thing Gaza a war. It's not a war to me. So how do you tell people that too? How do you when they say, food is too expensive? Things are too expensive. And at the end of the day, we have to explain reality to people too. Yeah. The president can do so much too, but the cost of food and stuff are a consequence of all these big events that happen around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think number one, I think it's really important to hear and understand people are struggling. Yeah, and I think that's the number one thing. And as far as the local legislature goes, in Olympia, some of the things that we can do to reduce costs will make a direct impact right away, right? Permitting and zoning reform so we can build housing more quickly, right? There's some things we can do for supply chains that will help to make sure that food and other things can be cheaper. I mean, there's lots of things we can do, locally that will reduce costs for families. The number one thing, though, that I hear is housing costs. And I do hear food costs as well, right? If you have a large family, which my district has a lot of large families, housing costs, food costs, but there's a third thing, which is childcare costs.
Yes.
Childcare costs are devastating families. So that's something I'm proud to run on, right? That's something that the legislature almost got across the finish line, which is we can start to invest in low-cost childcare, which we've never really had in this country. We've had some low-cost childcare, but it was usually because we had folks that stayed home, right? And if you needed childcare, that was more of a modern invention. So there were fewer people that needed childcare. Now, we need childcare almost every family because it takes 2 incomes to survive.
Exactly.
So if we lower housing costs, we lower childcare costs, and we do some things that we can reduce overall costs for consumer goods as best we can, right? We can't control the economy. I wish we could, right? People say, well, I'm mad at Biden because of this, or I'm mad at the Democrats because of this. Ultimately, market forces kind of dictate a lot of that, right? But we can do things to bring direct costs down. So that childcare cost, that housing costs, and some of those costs for consumer goods, we can do something in the legislature. But here's the issue. If we don't elect the right people, then we'll get the folks up there that will say, we'll take money from lobbyists and we don't want to get, this person mad, right? So we're not going to pass that bill. We're going to kill it in committee, right? So I think the number one thing for me is listening to people, hearing what they have to say,
Yes.
right? I'll never say that someone isn't, if their rent is $1,600 a month, I'm never going to say, well, that's cheap, right? My mortgage isn't much more than that, right? If someone's struggling to buy a house, oh, well, you'll be able to buy someday, right? I always want to hear that, and I care, and I want to make a difference so that their prices can come down.
Yeah.
But I think the second thing is we actually have to do something. We actually have to do something when elected, right? So when people say, hey, my housing costs are too high, we as Democrats can't say, oh, well, we'll work on that. We have to say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you rent stabilization at 5%
Have
a
a
year.
plan.
Have a plan. Tell them
Yes.
what you're going to do.
Yes.
Hear what somebody's saying. Understand their pain. And my wife and I, 10 years ago, we were getting evicted. I had lost my job. And then we became successful entrepreneurs, successful business owners. Not because, we're much better than anybody else, but frankly because this community cared, right? They helped. They said, hey, let us help you. You want to start flipping houses? You want to start, buying rentals? We're going to invest, right? So now it's my opportunity to invest back and say, here's how you can get out of these holes. Here's how you can get out of these things. So I think one of the things that a lot of times we do as Democrats, we don't tell what we're going to do. And then after we do it, like Biden, you were saying about Biden.
We don't say what we did.
Joe Biden passed the largest climate bill in history. Joe Biden passed the largest tax increase on the rich in history. Well, in modern history. The CHIPS Act, right? It's created, I think, already like over 20,000 jobs. It will create another 150,000.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
See, I didn't know that.
So these are things Democrats need to start talking about. And in the state legislature, one of the things we've done is we've created a cap and invest program that will help to fund our green infrastructure in the future, right? So those green jobs, everyone's talking about green jobs. Those green jobs have to be paid for. We have to invest in that infrastructure. Democrats have done that. Democrats have capped insulin costs for type 1 diabetics at $35 a month. Helped my family directly. So we have to start talking about what we have done and how we have done it, and also still hearing where people are struggling.
And what are we gonna do? Go ahead, Pastor Dennis.
One of the big objections that I know the Republican voters have is, okay, you are inflating government. You are suggesting that the government grow to do this stuff, and by the time my taxes increase, are these changes going to matter?
It's a great question. And I think this is not just Republicans. I think most voters want their tax dollars to be used efficiently. I know I do. As a successful small business owner, I pay a lot in taxes, right? And I know those taxes are going hopefully to something that will help people, that will increase our economic, benefit, that will, build our roads and our schools and do all those things that we want. I think having the honest conversation that sometimes Democrats aren't great about using tax dollars efficiently is important, because we have to. What are the number one priorities people have right now? Well, some of the things that we focus on, and I'm going to say this because I think there's a difference between a Democrat like me in the Puyallup area and a Democrat in King County. The Democrats in King County are going to have different priorities than I do. That's why it's important to elect all different types across the spectrum of Democrats, right? So my priorities are going to be protecting our communities from over warehouse development, making sure housing costs are lower, jobs, public safety, right? Those King County Democrats, we got to push back a little bit and say, hey, we don't need X, Y, and Z that might, be important for you right now, or you think might be important. The regular folks want their tax dollars used efficiently. And I believe in effective bureaucracy, right? You talked about expanding government. One of the things that Republicans have been doing for the last 50 to 70 years is, defund the beast, right? They want to take away the effectiveness of government so that they can privatize those sections of government, right? Because their belief is, the free market will, of course, be better, it will be more effective. And in some instances, few, there are times where that's the case. But there was a point in the 1960s where Republicans were also under the belief that government was becoming so efficient that their free market opinions and big business would never have a foothold in this country again. And so they said, we have to start taking resources away from government to make it look bad. Right? So now, what is the conversation most people have? They talk about the DMV or the Department of Licensing, right? That's their direct interaction with government. Or maybe it's getting unemployment insurance, right? Hey, I got laid off from my job. I qualify for unemployment, but it takes 6 weeks to get unemployment. I'm about investing. Invest in an effective government. If you have an effective bureaucracy, an effective government, then people say, this is working. My tax dollars are being used effectively. What's the other thing that people see right away? Schools, right? They say, I want this school to be the best school in the state. And if I'm a parent, that's what I want.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't matter where you live. You want that school to be the best, the teachers to be the best. Well, you have to invest. Right? You have to invest in bus. People are complaining in my district about bus schedules, which I hear them. That's very frustrating. Like, the bus is going to be late again. If you're a parent, you've got soccer practice and you got to wait for that bus to grab your kiddo and then take him to soccer practice and be late. Investing in those transportation resources, investing in your schools. If we invest, we do reap the benefits. And that creates an effectiveness, an efficiency. The problem is we want it both ways, right? We don't want to have our taxes go up, but we want effective and efficient government. So I think there's a balance there, right? Let's invest smartly. Let's invest in priorities. Let's have our government be effective. And to my Republican friends that say that the free market is the answer, look, there's so much that's subsidized by government now that our Republican friends believe is the free market. There's very little that's actually free market, right? The government subsidizes so much. Our tax dollars subsidize so much of their idea of what a free market is. It's just simply, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I think if investing efficiently, smartly, with the right priorities is the key.
Yeah. And reality is Republicans aren't really for a smaller government.
No.
They just want to send it overseas and hire a big military.
And one of the things I think
Yes, and the government would doubled in size under Trump.
And
I think.
hire and spend a lot of money on private industries to run penal institutions.
Horrific. Yeah.
And create all kinds of nightmares for us.
and I was thinking
Yes.
And one of the things I was thinking that you was just saying is that in order, you said something about King County and Pierce County, in order to know the needs of the community that you represent, you have to have that connection.
Have to.
And I'm hearing you, and I'm seeing that you are engaging with the people in the community. Because in order to know what, you cannot run it like you run in Seattle.
No.
Because that's not the need of the people here, like in Seattle. And I think that's also a miss that, we run in and we said, I'm a Democrat and I just want my Democrat people to vote for me. Why? I want you to tell me, what are you going to do? Yeah. Why should I trust you with my vote? So I think connection in your community and knowing the needs of your community. One of the things that I thought about policing, and I thought about churches too. We have churches, pastors that are pastors in some churches that, look, for example, I'm not saying that's true, but because I don't go to church now, but that church here in Tacoma, but they live in Bellevue, and that is a disconnect. You living in the community where you gonna represent and know the needs of the people is very important. Yes. Same thing with police. We have police that are working here, but they live in Puyallup.
Sure.
That is a disconnect. You know, you have to live in the community to know the people and the need of the community. So the same thing I'm thinking about big and small government. And one of the things that, and just reinforcing what you guys are saying, I hear people get really mad when somebody, a welfare, do a little bit of shadiness with $200.
Right.
And I tell people, you know, I know you're here and I'm here, but as you go up there is a lot of corporate welfare.
100%.
A lot of corporate welfare, a lot of money that is just given to corporation that is not accountable for anything. So yes, we're gonna talk about that person that took $200, but we gotta talk about the person that's receiving $200 million just subsidized for doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, we have an example right now in my district, Boeing Frederickson, right, which you all live pretty
Yes.
close, right?
Yes.
So the Boeing firefighters are locked out
Oh, I
by
hear
Boeing.
that. Yes.
Right? And so we've given hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks to Boeing. And we appreciate the jobs. We appreciate that they're building planes in Washington State.
And arms that they're sending in Israel.
Another conversation. Another conversation.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah, another conversation. Yeah, for sure. No, yeah. But as far as the good union jobs right here in my community, I'm a fan of that. What I don't like is that we give tax breaks to keep them here in Washington State, and then they lock out their firefighters. I mean, who locks firefighters out?
Wow.
I mean, so that's one of those things where, yes, we need to have that conversation with voters and say, hey, it's okay to have a marginal tax rate increase on a giant corporation. They're going to be fine.
Yes.
Especially when they're willing to lock out their firefighters, and we're giving them hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks.
Well, so, whatever breaks we are giving them should be contingent on them doing the right things for our own people.
For our workers, absolutely.
If they don't, then they lose it.
Yeah, and I think that's where we come in as a legislature, right?
Right.
We can say, hey, we're willing to give you these tax breaks, but every 95% of the jobs have to be union jobs.
Yeah.
Good living wage jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, how many folks have worked for Boeing right out of high school? They retire in their 50s or early 60s. Great careers.
Doing
good
pretty
lives.
well.
They're doing pretty well. Well, I want to continue that, but
Yeah.
we need to have something in return, right?
Right.
If we're gonna help you, then you have to help our community.
We do need to revisit it because at the time those rules were written, it was a Washington company.
That's right.
It's not a Washington company anymore.
That's right. That's right. They moved their headquarters. Yeah.
We can't live in the past.
And that's
We
what I
have to
was
live in the
thinking,
present.
because the other thing that people get afraid is to put those regulations to corporation, because they don't want to lose their jobs too.
Sure.
Because then these corporations will say, well, I will go elsewhere to the south where there is a right to work.
Yep.
That there's no union and no regulations.
Yeah.
So you always go into that line in the sand where they will say, well, we're not going to change. We can just go to North Carolina. That's where Boeing have some, yes.
Yeah, in the Charleston plant. Yeah, the big Charleston plant. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but one of the things I was thinking, childcare.
Yes.
I was talking to someone the other day, and she has a daycare in her home, and she loves it. And living in a time where it used to be a choice for one, and I said woman, for one of us to go out and work. When I was growing up with when my son was younger, my husband used to work at night. I work in the daytime. and my son never had to go to daycare, and there was times that I didn't work, and we still did fine because it wasn't so expensive to, So now we're running into a situation where I have like my son and I pastor then his daughter that they almost don't want to have kids because it's just too expensive to have kids. So how and it's very good that you said that because is I make $2,000 a month, and my partner, talking my younger side, makes another two. I know at least 1,000, 1,700 is gonna go in daycare.
Right.
So how and I think President Obama, I want to say President Obama, I don't know. President Biden the Democrats have been talking a lot about that.
They have.
It's just that we don't hear it, we don't see it.
Yes, and we almost had, Patty Murray, who's a senator here from Washington State, was pushing hard with some other folks in the Senate for essentially what would have been a beginning to universal child care. So an actual investment in child care in the United States. It didn't get through, but the investment we can make here is tremendous. And there's what's called a working families tax credit right now. I want to make sure everyone knows about this. Under a certain income in Washington State, you can get a tax credit every single year. And that's something the legislature passed 2 years ago. So that's something that will be cash directly in your pocket. I'm a big believer in, hey, if you have expenses, it's okay for us to give some money because that's going to overall help you. They've done studies on, if you give out universal basic income, what people spend their money on.
Right here in our community.
Bills, right here in Tacoma. They spend it on bills. And their stress level goes down, their work performance goes up, right? It's an overall benefit. So that's something that we can consider as well. If we can't get an overall child care bill passed, we can look at universal basic income or some investments in income for folks. And we have right now the working families tax credit, which the Washington State Democrats passed. But as far as child care, I do believe that is going to be one of the major issues for people continuing to have kids, because my wife and I don't have kids. We're unfortunately unable to have children. We would like to, but we were unable to have children. But we actually went through the foster process all the way through, and then the pandemic hit right as we were going to do our home study. So the home study was going to be done, which is the last piece, and then the pandemic hit, and it was like, whoa, we got to take a,
The universe is telling you.
Yeah.
Wait.
Exactly, we got to take a breath here. But what I think a lot of young families realize is when they have children, and this is what I'm hearing, when you have kids, when you have these housing expenses, you have the school expenses, you have all these expenses, it doesn't make you want to continue to have children, right? And so I think that's going to be a really important piece, is lowering those housing costs, but also child care costs. And we can do that in Washington State. And I think there's actually been some bills last session that didn't get through in the Washington State legislature that would have provided additional child care resources, additional investments in folks who wanted to have in-home child care, right? Up to 6 children or 8 children. Because it used to be like the neighbors would have a little daycare business, right? That's what I remember growing up. Everyone kind of had a little daycare.
My mother was one of those.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. And everyone kind of had a little daycare business. And so I think we need to get back to that. Those neighborhood, hey, these folks are licensed. Obviously, they go through the licensing process to make sure they're safe folks. But, instead of having to drive over to this very expensive childcare provider, hey, your local neighbor, you know them, they're licensed, drop them off, and then you can go to work. But if we don't do something, yes, our birth rate in Washington State has gone down quite a bit.
Yeah. And why it is so important, because I realize as that it get myself more and more into politics.
Sure.
I realize more and more that how important, and I don't want to discount the national elections.
Sure.
But the local elections are even more important.
Yeah.
I feel that way, like to me. And like when we start the show, it directly impacts your life. And how do you tell people that too? Because a lot of times people, when we have these big elections like now that we have Biden and Trump, people are all, engaged. But Washington State is one of the states that have election every year. And then you see people just don't know what's going on when it comes to elections. So what would you tell someone why it is even more important for you to vote locally than nationally?
Yeah. And you want to go ahead?
No, I agree with her. I think local elections determined your attitudes about national elections, and they should, because that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I would just say this. There's what's called undervotes in local elections. So people will get their ballot, and I don't blame them at all. They'll see, oh my gosh, there's 40 things to vote for, and they get through about half of the ballot. They vote for president and senator and Congress, and then they get to the judges, and they get to this, and they go, all right, I'm good. I'm going to just mail it in. Here's what I'm going to look in the camera and say this. If you get your ballot this year, especially for the primary election, there's going to be a lot of people on there. Flip your ballot over, vote local first. Vote for your state representatives first. Vote for your local judges first. Vote for the folks that are running for county council first, county executive first. Because guess what? The other side of the ballot's super easy. You already know it's Biden versus Trump, right? It's so-and-so versus so-and-so for Congress. Mm-hmm. Flip your ballot over, start there, get that done, and then flip it over. It's a lot easier. Because
that is a good idea.
It is. It is because, I've been that voter where I'm like,
I don't know what this is.
Wait, why are there 20 judges?
Yeah.
Yeah, like who is this?
Yeah.
And so if we had people finish their ballots, there's about 4,300 people that didn't finish their ballots in 2020 in our district alone.
And I'm one of them.
And that's okay. That's okay. I've done that too, where I just didn't know and I just leave it blank. Yeah. And so if you flip it over, start on your local elections first, you'll notice, okay, I'm learning a little bit more about the local issues. These are what's important. It's going to make a huge difference. Especially, for me as a Democrat, our voters are younger. They're folks of color, LGBTQ community. They're folks that don't usually get some of the attention that the Republican voters get, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not paying as much attention. And so flipping that ballot over, starting on the local elections first will make a huge difference.
And I was thinking about that because I keep complaining about this. Even I have someone that is a judge, older male, and he's 93 years old. And I was telling him that the other day. I was saying
93?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Sharp.
God bless him. Yeah.
And I was telling him, I said, I wish when they send the pamphlets, to the voter pamphlets, they explain to you in regular language what is it. Because, I have to pull my hair to figure out what is that person does.
Yeah.
And it doesn't explain anything. So you say, okay, I just gonna vote for this and this and that I know what this is, and I'm not gonna vote for this because I don't know what this person does.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I think that it should be they have these legal narratives that they put there that I don't know what that means. So I was telling him that too. I said, I think the pamphlet should be more just regular, basic language telling people, if you're going to vote for a judge, if you're going to vote for an audit, what is that person does instead of, so we know.
I think it would be good to be able to get some vehicle to get the heartbeat of the local people, what's important for these positions, what are the issues with these positions, and then require the candidates to speak to those issues.
Yeah, and that's brilliant.
That would be a lot smarter than letting them just, because all they're going to do, they're self-promoters. They're going to self-promote.
Yes.
And they're going to tell us what we want to hear.
Of course.
Fortunately, the one thing we can watch for is somebody who has an axe to grind.
Right.
And if you're like me, if they've got an axe to grind, they're already out. I'm not interested.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of voters are they get tired and they get frustrated. This year, this election is so important. And look, democracy is on the ballot, and that's your federal elections, your Donald Trump, but your local elections too. The Republicans in this state, the person running for Secretary of State on the Republican side wants to do away with mail-in voting. So wants to go back to complete, in-person voting and do some things that frankly would make voting less safe, but they think that this is going to be better.
And
right?
they're trying to make it harder for
They
people.
want to make people, want to make it harder to vote. But I agree, and one of the things that I ask, and the only thing I ask at the door when I'm talking to a voter is, what is on your mind? What can I help with? And I listen. I'm not there to pitch myself. I'm not there to sell. I'm just there to listen and see what's important to them, and then we have a conversation.
So what do you think the state of Washington is doing well, and what are they not doing well that you think a vote for you could impact?
Yeah, great question. Number one, we have probably the second best economy for business and workers in the United States. I believe we were ranked number 2
Yes.
last year.
Yes.
Our GDP, so our gross domestic product in Washington State, has doubled over the past 10 years. So let's give credit where credit is due. We have a strong economy. And if I was a Republican, that's what I would be running on, right? Our economy is strong. We have the second best economy in the United States. Here's the truth. People are being left behind. And that's why I'm a Democrat. We're going to bring those folks along. If you're struggling, if you're fighting for your housing costs, if you're dealing with childcare costs, if you feel like your community is unsafe, or if you're looking for a better job, we're going to bring that to your community, to my community. And that's what I'm running on is I know things are good for a lot of folks, but there's still people being left behind, and that's who I'm out to fight for. So, one of the things that Washington State has done really well, as I mentioned before, is we've capped insulin costs. We can also cap other prescription drug costs. A lot of people think, oh, well, insulin, maybe that's different. No, we can cap any prescription drug we want in this state, right? And so we can lower prescription drug costs directly for families here in Washington State. We can lower child care costs, right? We can increase the ability for folks to have access to child care. We can lower our housing costs. We can improve the number of jobs, especially good union jobs for the future. And I think one of the biggest things is we can continue to protect the values of this state. This is a progressive state,
Yes.
right? We are a progressive state. Like whether we're moderate progressive or left, we're still a progressive people. We believe that women have the right to make their own healthcare decisions, right? Democrats have done a good job protecting that. We want to protect our LGBTQ community, and we want to make sure that the folks that are getting jobs working for big companies are union jobs, right? We believe in union work and the value of work and the union way of life. So I would say that overall, we are exceeding expectations, but there's still people being left behind, and that's why I'm a Democrat. I want to bring everybody along.
And we have a couple minutes. So what would you tell people a little bit about in August, I think?
Yes, August 6th is the primary. August 6th is the primary election. Is that what you're asking about? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, August 6th is the primary election. It's really important that you vote in the primary election. The data shows us that if you vote in the primary, then you will vote in the general election. And I know, look, I've been the guy who's forgotten to vote. I think everyone has, right? Some random, levy that went out and, off time in the year. We didn't know, right? August 6th is the primary election. Ballots will be mailed in July. Vote early. Get your ballot in. Vote for your local elections first. Turn your ballot over. Vote local. Turn your ballot in early. August 6th is the primary election. If you vote in the primary, you will vote in the general election. And the reason why I think that's important and we need to talk about it is because there's so many voters who wait till the general election. They don't get their real choice. The primary is when we determine who the choice is to be on the general election ballot. So I would just encourage you to vote in that general election, or excuse me, that primary election, August 6th. As soon as you get your ballot, vote local, make your choice, and 99% of folks are then going to vote in the general.
Pastor Dennis, you have anything to say at closing?
No, I think this is wonderful. Tell us position 2. Who's running for position 2?
Shelley Willis is running for position 2. Let me just plug her. She's a phenomenal candidate, my running mate. I hope you have her on the show. She's a tremendous woman. She is a black woman. She's a military veteran, a business owner, the chair of the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Puyallup. You will love her. I hope you have her on.
Okay.
So let's do a 1-2 punch. Make a change.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
So, and for the people that are listening or watching this show or listening to this show through VT Radio Universal, just get engaged. I've been struggling a little bit, and Pastor, about this election this year. It's been because of all the stuff that is happening, but at the same time, we want to engage because politics is basically like we start the show, and you said it has to do with everything in our life. It has to do with the taxes that we pay. It has to do with the rent that we the homeowners. It has to do with the school where your kids are going to go. It has to do with the water, with the environment. It has to do with everything. So just get engaged. And for my Spanish community, that a lot of times we come here and we work so hard, but sometimes we don't get engaged in that part of the country or the state that we live in because we're so busy working, and not just for the Spanish community. A lot of times we just working, we doing our work that we don't have time. But getting engaged in politics, one of the things that it does, it also helps create those opportunities where you probably don't have to go to Seattle to work, and you can just get a really good paying job here in Tacoma that can provide those, and you don't have to be spending so much time in traffic or all those things. So we want to be thinking of all those things that can help us also be more effective, in our family environment, because a lot of times you spend too much time working, So thank you for
so much.
for being our guest.
Yes.
I hope it's not the first.
Yes, I'll
not
come
the
back.
last.
I'd be
When you
honored.
win.
Yes, when I win.
When you win,
Well, the
you
celebration
can be
party.
here.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Yes. So
And
thank you.
If I could just say,
Yes.
and if, I'm humbly asking for your vote if you live in the Puyallup area of the 25th Legislative District. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cameron, and thank you, Pastor Dennis.
Thank you both.
And thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Chris.